In the fog-draped heart of 1920s, London, a banker lies dead in a sealed vault, the air heavy with secrets and no sign of entry. Hercule Poirot, with his razor-sharp mind, unravels a web of deceit. A nervous guard hides a deadly flask, an ambitious colleague conceals stolen funds, and a poised client guards a shadowed past. A hidden device, a lethal gas, and a trail of lies point to one truth: murder. As the little grey cells close in, who will fall in the silent vault's trap? Chapter 1. The Sealed Tomb. The autumn morning draped London in a delicate mist, the kind that softened the edges of the city's grand edifices and lent an air of mystery to even the most mundane corners. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a tailored overcoat and a hat tilted at a precise angle, descended from a cab outside the Royal Dominion Bank. His polished shoes struck the cobblestones with a rhythmic click, each step a testament to his unyielding sense of order. The bank's façade loomed before him, its marble columns gleaming like sentinels under the pale sunlight. Yet there was an undercurrent of disquiet in the air. Inspector Japp stood at the entrance, his usually jovial face etched with a tension that made his moustache seem to droop. "Poirot, you're a sight for sore eyes," he said, his voice low as he gestured toward the heavy oak doors. "This one's a proper conundrum. A man dead in a sealed vault, no way in or out. It's got the whole force stumped." Poirot's green eyes glinted with curiosity, his moustache twitching, as if it too sensed the challenge. "A sealed vault, mon ami. That is a puzzle worthy of Hercule Poirot. Lead on, if you please, and let us examine this impossibility." Japp ushered him through the bank's cavernous interior, where clerks moved with hushed efficiency, their pens scratching like whispers against the weight of the morning's tragedy. The air was thick with the scent of polished wood and ink, but as they descended a spiral staircase to the lower levels, a colder, metallic tang took over. They reached the vault, a monolithic steel door, its surface unmarred by even a speck of dust. It stood slightly ajar now, revealing a glimpse of the grim scene within. Inside, the vault was a fortress of silence, its walls lined with gleaming safety deposit boxes, each one a silent guardian of secrets. At the center, slumped over a small oak desk, was the body of Harold Grayson, the head banker. His grey hair was disheveled, his hands splayed across a scattering of papers, as if he had been reaching for something in his final moments. The room was oppressively still, the air heavy with a faint, unplaceable odor, neither chemical nor organic, but unsettling all the same. Poirot stepped forward, his movements precise, his eyes darting over every detail. The vault was a perfect cube, its walls seamless steel, devoid of windows or vents. The desk held a single lamp, now extinguished, and a ledger open to a page of meticulous figures. Grayson's face was pale, his lips tinged with a faint bluish hue, his expression frozen in a mask of calm surprise. There were no signs of violence, no blood, no bruises, no overturned chairs. "Extraordinaire," Poirot murmured, kneeling beside the body. He adjusted his gloves and examined Grayson's hands, noting the absence of defensive marks. No struggle, no wounds. Yet death came swiftly, silently. "This is no ordinary murder, Inspector." Japp rubbed his chin, his brow furrowed. "That's what's got me, Poirot. The vault was locked from the inside. Combination lock. Only Grayson knew the code. The guard, Thomas Reed, found him at 6 this morning when he opened for the daily audit. Says he nearly dropped dead himself from the shock." Who else had access to this vault? Poirot asked, rising and circling the desk, his cane tapping lightly against the floor. 2 others with keys, Japp replied. Arthur Crane, Grayson's colleague, deputy head banker, and a client, Miss Eleanor Vale, who was here late yesterday for a private deposit. But Reed swears the vault was locked tight when he did his rounds at 10 last night. Nobody could have gotten in or out. Poirot paused, his gaze lingering on the steel door's intricate lock. And this lock, it shows no tampering, no scratches, no forced entry. None, Japp said. Clean as a whistle. We've had the best locksmiths look at it. Poirot's fingers traced the edge of the desk, pausing at a single sheet of paper that had slipped to the floor. It was a balance sheet, its columns filled with Grayson's precise handwriting. But a single red mark circled a figure, an anomaly, perhaps. He tucked the observation away, his mind already spinning with possibilities. Tell me, Japp, Poirot said, turning to face the inspector. What do we know of this Grayson? His habits? His enemies? Solid as they come, Japp replied. 20 years at the bank, no scandals, no debts. A widower, lived alone, worked late most nights. The staff say he was a stickler for detail, always checking the books himself. A stickler, Poirot repeated, his eyes narrowing. A man who notices things others miss. Such men, they make enemies, even if they do not know it. Japp shrugged. Maybe. But in a locked vault? It's impossible, Poirot. Poirot smiled faintly, his moustache curling upward. Impossible? No, mon ami. The impossible is merely a challenge to the little grey cells. We must learn more of this guard, this colleague, this client. One of them holds the key, not to the vault, but to the truth. He stepped back, casting a final glance at Grayson's lifeless form. Arrange for me to meet these 3, Inspector. And the autopsy report. I must have it at once. There is a method here, hidden in the silence of this tomb. Hercule Poirot will find it. As they left the vault, the heavy door groaned shut behind them, sealing its secrets once more. Poirot's mind, however, was already at work, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that promised to be as intricate as it was deadly. Chapter 2. The 3 Suspects. The oak-panelled boardroom of the Royal Dominion Bank exuded an air of sombre authority, its long mahogany table polished to a mirror-like sheen, reflecting the muted light of a chandelier above. Hercule Poirot stood at one end, his small, fastidious figure commanding the space, despite its modesty. His hands, gloved in immaculate kid leather, rested lightly on the head of his cane, and his green eyes, sharp as a hawk's, surveyed the 3 individuals seated before him. Inspector Japp hovered near the door, his notebook open, his expression a mixture of skepticism and anticipation. The morning's mist had thickened outside, pressing against the tall windows and casting a ghostly pall over the room, as if the very walls held their breath in the wake of Harold Grayson's death. Poirot's gaze moved methodically from one suspect to the next, each face a study in contrasts, each demeanour a potential mask. Thomas Reed, the guard, sat with his broad shoulders hunched, his calloused hands twisting a crumpled handkerchief. His uniform, though pressed, bore faint creases at the elbows, suggesting a man unaccustomed to sitting still. Arthur Crane, the deputy head banker, occupied the next chair, his lean frame rigid, his thin lips pressed into a line that betrayed both irritation and unease. His fingers drummed a silent rhythm on the table, betraying a nervous energy that seemed to hum beneath his tailored suit. Miss Eleanor Vale, the client, sat apart, her posture erect, her gloved hands folded with an elegance that bordered on defiance. Her emerald eyes met Poirot's with a steady calm, though a faint tightening at the corners of her mouth hinted at something unspoken. "Monsieur Reed, Monsieur Crane, Mademoiselle Vale," Poirot began, his voice smooth, yet laced with a quiet authority that stilled the room. "A tragedy has occurred within these walls, a puzzle most perplexing. Harold Grayson is dead, and yet the vault in which he met his end was sealed as tightly as a coffin. One of you, perhaps, knows more than you have yet revealed. Hercule Poirot seeks the truth, and the truth, it will be found." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. The chandelier's crystals tinkled faintly as a draught slipped through the room, and Reed shifted uncomfortably, his handkerchief now a damp knot in his hands. "Mr. Reed," Poirot continued, fixing his gaze on the guard, "you were the last to see Monsieur Grayson alive, were you not? Tell me, precisely, what transpired last night." Reed cleared his throat, his voice rough as gravel. "Like I told the inspector, sir, I did my rounds at 10 o'clock. Mr. Grayson was in the vault, working late, as he often did. He was at his desk, scribbling in one of those ledgers of his. I asked if he needed anything, but he waved me off, said he'd lock up himself. I saw him set the combination on the vault door before I left. That's the last I saw of him, I swear." Poirot's moustache twitched slightly, a subtle signal of his mind at work. "And this was his habit, to remain alone in the vault?" "Aye, sir," Reed nodded. "He'd stay late most nights, checking figures, cross-referencing accounts. Said it was the only time he could think proper, without the clerks buzzing about." "Most interesting," Poirot murmured. "And you noticed nothing unusual? No strangers lingering? No odd sounds or smells?" Reed hesitated, his eyes darting to the side before returning to Poirot. "Nothing out of the ordinary, sir. Just the usual hum of the bank winding down. The vault door clanged shut as I left, and I checked the outer locks on my way out." "All secure." Poirot's gaze lingered on Reed's hands, noting the faint tremor that betrayed more than the guard's words. "You are certain, Monsieur Reed? A man's life has ended, and even the smallest detail may be the key to unlocking this mystery." Reed's face flushed, and he twisted the handkerchief tighter. "I'm sure, sir. I did my job, same as always." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, and turned to Arthur Crane, whose drumming fingers had stilled abruptly. "Monsieur Crane, you were Grayson's colleague, his deputy. Tell me of your movements yesterday." Crane adjusted his tie, a nervous gesture that did little to mask his discomfort. His voice, when he spoke, was clipped, precise, as if rehearsed. "I left the bank at 6 o'clock, as I told Inspector Japp. Grayson was still here, poring over his ledgers in the vault. He was particular, always insisting on reviewing every detail himself. I had no reason to stay. My work was done for the day." "Particular, you say?" Poirot tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. "In what manner was Monsieur Grayson particular?" Crane's jaw tightened, and for a moment he seemed to weigh his words. "He was obsessive, if I'm to be honest. Always checking the books, questioning entries, even ones I'd already verified. He didn't trust easily, not even his own staff. It could be frustrating." "Frustrating?" Poirot repeated softly, as if tasting the word. "And did this frustration ever lead to disagreement between you?" Crane's eyes flickered, a spark of defiance breaking through his unease. "Disagreement? No, nothing serious. We had our differences, but Grayson was the senior man. His word was final." Poirot's smile was faint, almost imperceptible. And yet, a man so meticulous, so distrustful, might uncover secrets others wish to keep hidden? None. Tell me, Monsieur Crane, did Grayson ever question your work directly? Crane's fingers resumed their drumming, a staccato beat against the polished wood. He questioned everyone's work, he said sharply. It was his nature. If he suspected anything, it were never said so to me. Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Miss Eleanor Vale, who had remained silent, her composure a stark contrast to the men's agitation. "And you, Mademoiselle Vale," he said, his tone softening, but no less piercing. "Your business here, yesterday evening, what was its nature?" Miss Vale met his gaze without flinching, her voice cool and measured. "As I informed Inspector Japp, I visited the bank at 8 o'clock for a private deposit. Family heirlooms, items of sentimental value. Mr. Grayson assisted me in the vault, as was customary for such transactions. He was alive and well when I left." "Sentimental value," Poirot echoed, his eyes studying the delicate curve of her gloved hands. "And yet, such a late hour for a deposit, mademoiselle. Most unusual, no?" Her lips curved into a faint smile, though her eyes remained guarded. "My schedule is demanding, Monsieur Poirot. Evening was the only time I could manage. Mr. Grayson was kind enough to accommodate me." "And during this meeting," Poirot pressed, "did you observe anything out of the ordinary? A mood, perhaps, in Monsieur Grayson? A sign of unease?" Miss Vale's smile faded, and for a moment her fingers tightened around each other. He seemed preoccupied, perhaps a little distracted, but he was professional, as always. We completed the deposit, and I left. Poirot leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "And you are certain, mademoiselle, that you left him alone in the vault? No one else was present?" Her eyes held his, unflinching. "Quite certain, Monsieur Poirot. I saw no one else." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air like the mist outside. Poirot straightened, his cane tapping once against the floor as he surveyed the trio once more. "3 accounts," he said, "each tidy, each precise. And yet, one of you holds a piece of this puzzle that doesn't fit. The little grey cells, they will find it." Japp, who had been scribbling notes, cleared his throat. "Anything else you need from them, Poirot?" "For now, non," Poirot replied, his eyes still fixed on the suspects. "But I ask that you remain in London, all of you. The truth, it has a way of revealing itself, and Hercule Poirot will be watching." As the suspects rose to leave, Poirot's gaze lingered on each in turn. Reed shuffled out first, his head bowed, the handkerchief now a sodden lump in his pocket. Crane followed, his steps quick and jerky, as if eager to escape the room's scrutiny. Miss Vale moved last, her movements graceful but deliberate, pausing at the door to glance back at Poirot. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a challenge in her eyes, a silent dare to unravel her secrets. When the room was empty, save for Poirot and Japp, the inspector let out a long breath. "Well, Poirot, what do you make of them? Reed's nervous as a cat, Crane's hiding something, and that Miss Vale, she's cool as ice, but I'd wager she knows more than she's letting on." Poirot smiled, a small enigmatic curve of his lips. "They are a study in contrasts, mon ami. Reed, he is the simple man, perhaps too simple, his fear too pronounced. Crane, he is the ambitious one, his nerves betraying a guilt that may or may not be murderous. And Mademoiselle Vale, she is the enigma, her calm a mask that hides. What? A secret, perhaps, but not necessarily a crime. Japp frowned, flipping through his notebook. You think one of them did it, then? But how? That vault was locked tight. No way in, no way out. Poirot's eyes gleamed with a quiet intensity. The how, Inspector, is the heart of this mystery. A vault sealed from within, a man dead without a mark. Such things are not impossible, only clever. We must look beyond the steel and stone, to the minds of those who knew Grayson best. He stepped to the window, gazing out at the mist-shrouded street. I wish to see Grayson's office, Japp. His papers, his habits, they will speak to us. And the autopsy report, it must be expedited. The body, it holds clues the vault cannot conceal. Japp nodded, tucking his notebook away. I'll have the report by this afternoon. Grayson's office is upstairs, untouched since last night. Anything else? Poirot turned, his expression resolute. Oui, mon ami. I wish to know more of this bank, its operations, its secrets. A man like Grayson, so meticulous, does not die by accident. Someone wished him silenced, and we must discover why. As they left the boardroom, the chandelier's light flickered, casting fleeting shadows across the polished table. Poirot's mind was already at work, sifting through the words, the glances, the silences of the three suspects. Each had a story, each had a motive, but only one held the key to the silent vault's deadly secret. The little grey cells, as always, would not rest until they found it. Chapter 3. The Banker's Secret. The afternoon light filtered weakly through the heavy drapes of Harold Grayson's office, casting long, sombre shadows across the room. Hercule Poirot stood at the threshold, his keen eyes absorbing every detail of the space that had been the domain of the late head banker. The office was a study in order, a reflection of the man who had occupied it. Shelves lined with neatly bound ledgers, a desk free of clutter save for a single inkwell and a silver pen, and a chair positioned with geometric precision. The air carried the faint scent of leather and old paper, tinged with the metallic undertone that seemed to linger from the vault below. Inspector Japp, standing beside Poirot, shifted impatiently, his hands clasped behind his back. This was Grayson's sanctuary, Japp said, gesturing to the room. Spent more time here than at home, by all accounts. If there's a clue to what got him killed, it's likely here. Poirot nodded, his moustache quivering slightly as he stepped forward, his cane tapping softly against the polished floorboards. A man's office, mon ami, is a mirror to his mind. Let us see what secrets Monsieur Grayson kept. He began his examination at the desk, his gloved fingers tracing the edge of the polished mahogany. The surface was pristine, but a single drawer, slightly ajar, caught his attention. He tugged it open, revealing a collection of personal items: a pocket watch, a monogrammed handkerchief, and a small, leather-bound diary. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he lifted the diary, its cover worn from frequent handling. Most interesting, he murmured, flipping through the pages. The entries were written in Grayson's meticulous hand, each date and note recorded with the precision of a man who trusted nothing to chance. Most were mundane: appointments, reminders of audits, notes on client transactions. But as Poirot neared the final pages, the tone shifted. An entry dated a week prior read, "Discrepancies in the southern accounts. Sums do not align. Must speak to A.C. tomorrow." Another 3 days later was more cryptic. E.V. insists on absolute discretion. Her urgency troubles me. What does she conceal? Poirot's brow furrowed as he handed the diary to Japp. A.C., This could be Arthur Crane, non? And E.V., Mademoiselle Vale. Grayson was troubled, Inspector. He suspected something, perhaps enough to cost him his life. Japp skimmed the pages, his expression darkening. Sounds like he was on to Crane. Embezzlement, maybe. And Miss Vale? Her discretion business doesn't sit right. Could be blackmail, or something tied to those heirlooms she mentioned. Perhaps, Poirot said, his voice thoughtful. But we must not leap to conclusions. The little grey cells, they require evidence, not speculation. He turned his attention to the shelves, scanning the rows of ledgers. Each was labelled with a year and a client code, their spines aligned with military precision. Poirot selected one at random, flipping through its pages of neatly inked figures. Nothing seemed amiss, but the diary's mention of discrepancies gnawed at him. He replaced the ledger and moved to a locked cabinet in the corner, its brass keyhole gleaming faintly in the dim light. "Japp, have you a key for this?" Poirot asked, tapping the cabinet with his cane. Japp shook his head. "Not yet." Grayson kept his keys close. "We found a ring of them on his body, but none fit this lock. I've got men searching his home for spares." Poirot's lips pursed. A locked cabinet in a locked office, in a bank of locked vaults. Monsieur Grayson was a man who valued secrecy. "We must open this, Inspector. It may hold the key to his death." As Japp made a note to summon a locksmith, a clerk entered, a nervous young man with ink-stained fingers. "Inspector, sir. The autopsy report's just arrived from the coroner. I was told to bring it up straight away." Japp took the envelope, tearing it open with a grunt. Poirot watched as the inspector's eyes scanned the page, his frown deepening. "Well, that's no help," Japp muttered, handing the report to Poirot. "No poison, no wounds, no signs of a struggle. Heart stopped, that's all. Coroner says possible asphyxiation, but the air in the vault wasn't depleted enough to kill. He's baffled." Poirot read the report carefully, his fingers tracing the coroner's words. "No toxic substances detected. Slight cyanosis of lips and fingertips, suggesting oxygen deprivation, but no clear mechanism. Cause of death inconclusive." He closed the report, his mind racing. Asphyxiation, yet no lack of air. A paradox, Japp. This was no natural death, but a murder most cunning. He returned to the desk, his eyes falling on a small silver paperweight shaped like an owl, a curious object for so austere a man. Lifting it, he noticed a faint scratch on the desk beneath, barely visible but deliberate, as if something had been dragged across the surface. He knelt, peering closer, and saw a thin seam in the wood, almost imperceptible. With a gentle press, a hidden compartment clicked open, revealing a single folded letter. Poirot unfolded it with care. The paper was heavy, the handwriting unfamiliar, and the message brief. "Meet me at 9 tomorrow. We must resolve this before it goes further." According, the date was 2 days prior to Grayson's death. "Arthur Crane again," Japp said, peering over Poirot's shoulder. "This is looking worse for him by the minute." "Perhaps," Poirot replied, folding the letter and slipping it into his pocket. "But a letter proves only intent to meet, not to kill. We must dig deeper, mon ami." The clerk lingered, shifting from foot to foot. "Sir, there's something else. One of the tellers mentioned Grayson was agitated yesterday morning, kept muttering about irregularities, and said he'd have to take it to the board if he couldn't sort it out." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Irregularities. Merci, young man. This is most helpful." As the clerk departed, Poirot paced the room, his cane a steady metronome against the floor. Grayson was closing in on something, Jap. A financial irregularity, perhaps, tied to Crane or another. And this letter suggests he confronted someone, possibly Crane, about it. But the vault, the sealed vault, how was it done? Jap rubbed his neck, his frustration evident. That's the rub, Poirot. Even if Crane had a motive, how'd he get Grayson in there without a trace? And why no marks on the body? Poirot stopped pacing, his gaze fixed on the owl paperweight. The method, Inspector, is the heart of this mystery. A man does not die in a sealed room without a mechanism, a device, a plan. We must search for what is not seen. The invisible hand that struck. He moved to the window, pulling back the drape to reveal the mist-shrouded street below. The bank's grandeur seemed muted, as if the fog itself conspired to obscure the truth. "I wish to visit Grayson's home," Poirot said abruptly. "His office tells us of his work, but his home may reveal the man. And the locked cabinet. See that it is opened, Jap. I suspect it holds more than ledgers." Jap nodded, jotting another note. "I'll get the locksmith here by evening. Grayson's flat is near Regent's Park. I can have a car ready in an hour." "Bon," Poirot said, adjusting his hat. "And one more thing, mon ami. Speak to the tellers, the clerks, anyone who saw Grayson yesterday. A man agitated, as our young friend said, does not hide his mood entirely. There will be witnesses to his state of mind." As they left the office, Poirot cast a final glance at the desk, the owl paperweight staring back with unblinking eyes, the diary, the letter, the mention of irregularities. They were threads in a tapestry yet to be woven. Grayson had been a man of secrets, and one of those secrets had led to his death. Poirot's little grey cells buzzed with anticipation, for he knew that the truth, however deeply buried, could not remain hidden from Hercule Poirot. Chapter 4. The Guard's Tale. The late afternoon sky over London was a sullen grey. The mist now thickened into a drizzle that pattered against the narrow windows of the Thomas Reed's modest flat near the docks. The air carried the briny tang of the Thames, mingled with the faint reek of coal smoke from nearby chimneys. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned tightly against the damp, stepped carefully over the uneven cobblestones leading to Reed's door. Inspector Japp followed, his collar turned up, muttering about the weather's knack for making a grim day grimmer. The flat was a cramped affair, its single room cluttered with the necessities of a working man's life. A sagging bed, a chipped table, and a small stove that radiated meagre warmth. Thomas Reed stood near the table, his burly frame filling the space, his hands occupied with polishing a pair of worn boots. The task seemed more a distraction than a necessity, for his movements were jerky, his eyes darting to Poirot and Japp as they entered. The guard's uniform hung on a peg by the door, its brass buttons dull in the dim light, a silent testament to his station. "Monsieur Reed," Poirot began, his voice calm yet carrying the weight of scrutiny. "I thank you for receiving us in your home. There are questions, you understand, that must be asked. The death of Monsieur Grayson demands answers, and you, as the last to see him alive, are of particular interest to Hercule Poirot." Reed set the boots down, his thick fingers fumbling with a rag. "I've told you all I know, sir," he said, his voice hoarse, as if worn by repetition. "I checked the vault at 10, like always. Mr. Grayson was there, alive, working. He said he'd lock up himself. I left him to it." Poirot's green eyes, sharp as cut glass, studied. The guard's face. Reed's broad features were flushed, his brow glistening with a faint sheen of sweat despite the chill. "You are certain of this, Monsieur Reed? Every detail, it is vital. Describe, if you please, exactly what you saw in the vault." Reed shifted, his hands twisting the rag into a tight knot. "It was like any other night, sir. Mr. Grayson was at his desk, scribbling in one of his ledgers. The lamp was on, casting a glow over his papers. He looked tired, maybe, but not unusual. He waved me off when I asked if he needed anything, said he was nearly done. I saw him turn the dial on the vault door as I left, heard the bolts slide into place. That's all." Poirot tilted his head, his moustache twitching slightly. "And the vault itself? You noticed nothing out of place? No objects, no smells, no sounds that were not as they should be?" Reed's eyes flicked to the side, a fleeting movement that did not escape Poirot's notice. "No, sir, just the usual. The vault's always quiet, heavy-like. No smells, no noises, except maybe the hum of the lamp." Poirot stepped closer, his cane resting lightly against the floor. "You are nervous, Monsieur Reed. Your hands, they tremble. Your eyes, they avoid mine. Why is this? Is there something you conceal from Hercule Poirot?" Reed's flush deepened, and he dropped the rag, his hands clenching into fists. "I ain't hiding nothing. It's a bad business, finding Mr. Grayson dead like that. Makes a man jumpy, that's all." Poirot's smile was faint, almost imperceptible. "Jumpy, oui, but perhaps there is more. Tell me, Monsieur Reed, you spoke to Inspector Japp of a flask you carried that night, yes? A flask you claim to have lost. This is most curious, no?" Reed's shoulders stiffened, and for a moment he seemed to shrink into himself. I mentioned that, didn't I? Just a nip of whiskey, sir, to keep the chill off. I must have dropped it somewhere after my rounds. Nothing to it." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping to a soft, probing tone. "Dropped it, you say? A flask is a personal thing, Monsieur Reed, not easily mislaid by a man of your habits. Where did you last see it?" Reed swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. I don't recall exactly. Maybe in the bank, maybe on my way home. It's gone, that's all I know." Japp, who had been silent, stepped forward, his notebook open. "Come now, Reed, you're not making this easy. A man's dead, and you're vague about something as simple as a flask. If you know something, out with it." Reed's eyes darted between Japp and Poirot, his breath quickening. "I swear, I don't know nothing about no murder. I found Mr. Grayson dead, that's all. I didn't touch nothing, didn't see nothing." Poirot raised a hand, silencing Japp's retort. "Calm yourself, Monsieur Reed. Let us consider. You checked the vault at 10. You saw Grayson alive. You heard the bolts lock, and yet, by morning, he was dead, in a vault sealed from within. If you saw nothing, then perhaps you overlooked something, a detail, however small, that might unlock this mystery." Reed shook his head, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't overlook nothing. I did my job, same as always." Poirot paced the small room, his cane tapping a slow rhythm. He paused by the window, peering out at the rain-slicked street, where a lone lamplighter was beginning his rounds. "Your job, oui. And yet, a flask is missing, and a man is dead. Tell me, Monsieur Reed, did Grayson ever speak to you of his work? Of troubles, perhaps, within the bank?" Reed hesitated, then nodded slowly. He was worried, last few weeks. Kept muttering about numbers not adding up. Didn't say much to me, mind you. I'm just the guard. But I heard him talking to himself once or twice about irregularities and needing to sort it out. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Irregularities. This word, it follows us like a shadow. Did he mention names? Monsieur Crane, perhaps, or Mademoiselle Vale? No names, sir, Reed said, his voice steadier now. Just numbers and accounts. He was proper worked up, though. Kept pacing the vault one night, muttering about someone not being straight with him. Poirot turned, his expression unreadable. Merci, Monsieur Reed. You have been most helpful, even if you do not know it. We will speak again, I think. As they stepped back into the drizzle, Japp pulled his hat lower against the rain. What do you make of him, Poirot? He's scared, that's plain. But is he guilty? Poirot adjusted his gloves, his gaze distant. Scared, oui, but of what? Of guilt or of something else? The flask, Japp. It is no mere trinket. It is a clue, perhaps the key to how death entered a sealed vault. We must find it, or learn what it contained. Japp grunted, jotting a note. I'll have my men check the bank again, and the route from here to the docks. If that flask's out there, we'll turn it up. Bon, Poirot said, his voice firm. And I wish to see Grayson's home next. The office, the vault, they tell us of his work. But his home, it will tell us of his heart. And the heart, mon ami, often holds the deepest secrets. As they climbed into the waiting car, the rain intensified, drumming against the roof like a warning. Poirot's mind was a whirl of fragments, Reed's trembling hands, Grayson's mutterings, the missing flask. Each was a piece of the puzzle, and though the picture remained obscured, Hercule Poirot knew that order and method would bring it into focus. The silent vault had claimed a life, but it could not silence the truth. Chapter 5. The colleagues' ambition, the drizzle had softened into a fine mist by the time Hercule Poirot and Inspector Japp arrived at the Royal Dominion Bank once more. The grand edifice looming like a silent sentinel in the fading light. The corridors within were hushed, the clerks moving with the subdued efficiency of those aware of the tragedy in their midst. Poirot's polished shoes clicked against the marble floor as he followed Japp to the office of Arthur Crane, the deputy head banker. The air was thick with the scent of ink and wax, but beneath it lingered the faint, metallic tang that seemed to haunt every corner of this place since Harold Grayson's death. Crane's office was a stark contrast to Grayson's orderly domain. Papers spilled across the desk in haphazard piles, ink bottles stood uncapped, and a half-empty teacup balanced precariously on a stack of ledgers. The man himself sat hunched over a balance sheet, his thin frame taut with tension, his sharp features pinched as if he bore the weight of the bank's troubles on his narrow shoulders. His fingers, stained with ink, paused mid-calculation as Poirot and Japp entered, and his eyes, dark and wary, flicked up to meet them. Monsieur Crane, Poirot began, his voice smooth, yet carrying an edge of quiet authority. I thank you for sparing a moment. The death of Monsieur Grayson, it is a matter most grave, and your assistance is essential to uncover the truth. Crane set down his pen, his movements deliberate, though a faint tremor betrayed his unease. Of course, Monsieur Poirot, he said, his tone clipped. I've told Inspector Japp everything I know. I left the bank at 6. Grayson was alive, working in the vault. I had no reason to stay. Poirot's green eyes, sharp and unyielding, studied the man before him. He noted the creases in Crane's otherwise immaculate suit, the nervous tick at the corner of his mouth. Oui, you have said this. But let us explore further, Monsieur Crane. You were Grayson's deputy, his trusted colleague, non? Yet his diary suggests he suspected irregularities in the accounts, irregularities tied to the initials AC. Tell me, what do you know of this? Crane's face paled, his fingers tightening around the pen he still held. Irregularities? That's absurd. Grayson was paranoid, always scrutinizing my work, questioning every entry. I've done nothing wrong, Monsieur Poirot. Nothing. Poirot tilted his head, his moustache curling slightly, as if in amusement, though his eyes remained piercing. Paranoid, you say? A curious choice of word. A man so meticulous, so precise, does not question without reason. Did he confront you, Monsieur Crane? Did he accuse you of tampering with the bank's funds? Crane's jaw clenched, and for a moment he seemed to wrestle with his response. He asked me about some discrepancies a week ago, he admitted, his voice low. Small sums, misallocated in the southern accounts. He thought I'd made errors, but I told him I was looking into it myself. I wasn't stealing, if that's what you're implying. Someone else was altering the books, and I was trying to find out who. Poirot's gaze did not waver. Someone else, you say? And who might this someone be? Crane hesitated, his eyes darting to the side before returning to Poirot. I don't know for certain, but Miss Vale, perhaps. She had private meetings with Grayson, late ones in the vault. I saw them once, whispering in the corridor. It wasn't my place to ask, but it struck me as odd. She's a client, not staff. Why was she so involved? Poirot's fingers tapped lightly on the head of his cane, a rhythmic counterpoint to the tension in the room. Whispering, you say? Most intriguing. And what else did you observe, Monsieur Crane? For a man in your position, so close to Grayson, you must have seen much. Crane leaned back, his chair creaking under the shift of his weight. Grayson was under pressure, he said, his voice steadier now, as if he sensed an opportunity to deflect. The board was pushing for a new audit, and he was obsessed with getting every figure right. He didn't trust anyone. Not me, not the clerks, not even Reed, though he's just a guard. If he suspected me, it was because he suspected everyone. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. And yet, his diary names you, Monsieur Crane. A C, beside entries of missing funds, and a letter found in his desk, signed with your initials, requesting a meeting to resolve matters. This does not look favorable, no? Crane's eyes widened, a flash of panic breaking through his composure. A letter? I wrote no such thing. Yes, we spoke about the accounts, but I never sent him any letter. Someone's trying to frame me, Monsieur Poirot. You must believe me. Japp, who had been quietly taking notes, interjected. Frame you, eh? That's a convenient story, Crane. Those initials aren't exactly common, and Grayson's diary doesn't lie. Poirot raised a hand, silencing Japp's challenge. Let us not rush to judgment, mon ami. Monsieur Crane, you say you were investigating these discrepancies. Did you find anything? A name? A pattern? A clue? Crane swallowed, his fingers resuming their nervous drumming on the desk. Not yet. The sums were small, spread across multiple accounts, hard to trace. I told Grayson I'd need more time. He wasn't happy, said he'd take it to the board if I couldn't sort it out. Poirot's eyes gleamed, a spark of insight flickering within them. The board, you say, a serious step, and this pressure, it weighed heavily on Grayson, oui? Perhaps enough to make enemies. Crane's lips parted, then closed, as if reconsidering his words. I suppose so. Grayson wasn't one to make friends easily. He was respected, but not liked. Too rigid, too demanding. Poirot stepped closer to the desk, his gaze falling on a small photograph in a silver frame. A younger Crane, standing beside an older man who bore a faint resemblance to Grayson. "This is you with Monsieur Grayson, no?" A moment of camaraderie, perhaps. Crane's expression softened briefly, then hardened again. "Years ago, when I first joined the bank. He was my mentor, in a way. But that was before he became so impossible." "Impossible," Poirot repeated softly, as if tasting the word. "A man who mentors, then becomes impossible, often sees something in his protégé that disappoints. What did he see in you, Monsieur Crane?" Crane's face flushed, and he stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I've had enough of this, Monsieur Poirot. I've answered your questions. I didn't kill Grayson, and I won't be accused of it." Poirot's smile was serene, almost infuriatingly so. "Calm yourself, Monsieur Crane. Accusations are not my purpose. Not yet. But the truth, it has a way of revealing itself, and Hercule Poirot is patient." Japp closed his notebook with a snap. "We'll need you to stay in London, Crane. Don't go anywhere without letting us know." Crane nodded curtly, his hands clenched at his sides. "I've no plans to leave. I want this cleared up as much as you do." As Poirot and Japp left the office, the mist outside had thickened, cloaking the street in a veil of grey. Poirot adjusted his hat, his mind sifting through Crane's words, his denials, his deflections. "A man on edge, Japp," he said, as they stepped into the waiting car. "He protests his innocence, yet his fear is palpable. The letter, the diary, they point to him, but perhaps too neatly." Japp frowned, his fingers tapping the steering wheel. "You think he's being set up? That letter could have been planted, I suppose. But who'd go to that trouble?" Poirot's eyes narrowed, his thoughts racing. "Someone with much to hide, mon ami. Crane's ambition, his access to the accounts, they make him a convenient target. But we must consider Mademoiselle Vale, and even Reed. Each has a role in this drama, and the stage is the vault itself." He leaned back, his gaze distant. "I wish to see the vault again, Japp. There is something there, something we have overlooked. And the locksmith, has he opened Grayson's cabinet yet?" "Not yet," Japp replied. "He's working on it now. Should have it by morning." "Bon," Poirot said, his voice firm. "And I wish to know more of these irregularities Grayson mentioned. Have your men examine the bank's ledgers, those tied to the southern accounts. The numbers, they will tell us what words conceal." As the car pulled away, the bank's silhouette faded into the mist, its secrets locked within, like the vault that had claimed Grayson's life. Poirot's little grey cells were alight with possibilities, each thread, Crane's ambition, the mysterious letter, the missing flask, weaving into a pattern that was beginning to take shape. The truth was close, he felt it, but it remained just out of reach, hidden in the shadows of human motive and cunning design. Chapter 6. The Client's Motive. The evening had settled over, London like a velvet curtain, the mist now a persistent veil that blurred the gaslights into soft halos. Hercule Poirot's cab wound through the quiet streets of Mayfair, its wheels whispering against the damp cobblestones, until it stopped before an elegant townhouse, its façade adorned with ivy and lit by the warm glow of lanterns. This was the residence of Miss Eleanor Vale, the enigmatic client whose late-night visit to the Royal Dominion Bank had piqued Poirot's curiosity. Inspector Japp, ever the dutiful companion, adjusted his overcoat as they stepped from the cab, his expression a mix of skepticism and weariness. "Mademoiselle Vale," Poirot mused, his green eyes scanning the townhouse's polished windows. "She is a woman of poise, of secrets. Her role in this affair, Jap, is not yet clear, but I sense it is pivotal." Jap grunted, his breath visible in the chilly air. "She's too calm for my liking, Poirot. Most folks would be rattled, being questioned about a murder. But her, cool as a cucumber, makes you wonder what she's hiding." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing at its edges. "Precisely, mon ami. The calm, it is often a mask. Let us see what lies beneath." The door was opened by a prim maid who led them into a drawing-room furnished with understated elegance, a velvet settee, a mahogany tea-table, and a fireplace casting a flickering warmth. Miss Eleanor Vale stood to greet them, her figure framed against the firelight, her dark hair swept into a graceful chignon. She wore a simple yet refined dress of deep burgundy, her gloved hands clasped before her with the ease of a woman accustomed to scrutiny. Her emerald eyes met Poirot's with a directness that was neither defensive nor welcoming, but something altogether more guarded. "Monsieur Poirot, Inspector Japp," she said, her voice smooth and measured. "I expected your visit. Please be seated. May I offer you tea?" Poirot inclined his head, settling into a chair with his usual fastidious care. "Merci, mademoiselle, but I prefer to keep my mind unclouded by refreshment. We are here to discuss matters most serious, the death of Monsieur Grayson, and your presence at the bank on the night he died." Miss Vale's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile as she took her seat, her posture as composed as a portrait. "I have told you all I know, Monsieur Poirot. I visited the bank at 8 o'clock to deposit family heirlooms. Mr. Grayson assisted me in the vault, as was his custom for such transactions. He was alive when I left, and I saw nothing amiss." Poirot's fingers rested lightly on the head of his cane, his gaze unwavering. "Oui, you have said this. But let us explore further, mademoiselle. Grayson's diary, it mentions you, E.V., and speaks of your insistence on secrecy. Why such discretion for mere heirlooms? What is it you wished to keep hidden?" For the first time, a flicker of unease crossed Miss Vale's face, though it was swiftly masked. She smoothed her gloves, her movements deliberate. "The heirlooms are personal, Monsieur Poirot. They are tied to my family's history, a history not without its shadows. I preferred to keep the matter private to avoid gossip. Surely you understand the value of discretion." Poirot's eyes gleamed, catching the firelight like polished jade. "Discretion, oui, I understand. But secrecy, mademoiselle, it invites questions. Grayson was troubled. His diary suggests as much. Did he know something about these shadows in your family's past? Something, perhaps, you wish to keep from the world?" Miss Vale's fingers tightened briefly, a subtle tell that did not escape Poirot's notice. "You are mistaken," she said, her voice steady, but colder now. "My dealings with Mr. Grayson were purely professional. He was courteous, efficient, nothing more. If he was troubled, it was not because of me." Japp, who had been standing near the fireplace, interjected, his notebook open. "That's all well and good, Miss Vale. But you were in the vault with him, alone, at an odd hour. And Crane says he saw you whispering with Grayson, looking secretive. Care to explain that?" Miss Vale's gaze shifted to Japp, her expression coolly defiant. "Mr. Crane is mistaken, or perhaps he seeks to divert attention from himself. I spoke with Mr. Grayson about the deposit, nothing more. If we were quiet, it was because the vault is no place for loud conversation. As for Mr. Crane, I'd wager he had more reason to fear Grayson than I did. He was ambitious, always hovering, eager for Grayson's position. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but probing. Ambitious, you say? And you observed this in Monsieur Crane. Tell me, mademoiselle, what else did you see in the bank? For a woman of your perception, the little details, they do not go unnoticed. Miss Vale hesitated, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if weighing how much to reveal. I noticed tension, she said at last. Grayson was distracted that evening, checking his watch, glancing at the vault door as if expecting someone. I thought it odd, but I assumed it was the pressure of his work. The bank, it seemed, was not a happy place. Poirot's moustache quivered, a sign of his mind at work. Tension, oui. And did you see anyone else that night? The guard, Monsieur Reed, perhaps, or another soul lingering where they should not? She shook her head, her expression resolute. No one. The bank was quiet when I arrived, and when I left. Only Mr. Grayson and I were in the vault, and Reed was at his post by the outer doors when I passed him on my way out. Poirot nodded, his fingers tapping a slow rhythm on his cane. You paint a picture of solitude, mademoiselle, yet death found its way into that vault. Tell me, did Grayson speak of irregularities in the accounts? Of suspicions, perhaps, about his colleague? Miss. Vale's lips parted, then closed, a brief hesitation that spoke volumes. He mentioned nothing specific, she said carefully. But he did say something about needing to set things right. I took it as a figure of speech, nothing more. Japp scribbled in his notebook, his brow furrowed. Set things right, eh? Sounds like he was on to something. Or someone. Maybe Crane, maybe someone else. Poirot's gaze remained fixed on Miss Vale, his eyes searching for the truth behind her composed façade. And you, mademoiselle, you are certain you left Grayson alone? No one entered as you departed? No sound? No shadow? Her eyes met his, unflinching. I am certain, Monsieur Poirot. I left him at his desk, alive, and locked the outer door behind me. Whatever happened after, I had no part in it. Poirot leaned back, his expression serene, but his mind racing. Merci, Mademoiselle Vale. Your words, they are clear, yet the puzzle remains. The truth, it hides in the spaces between what is said and what is not. As they rose to leave, Miss Vale stood, her movements graceful, but deliberate. I trust you will find the truth, Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice tinged with a challenge. But if you seek a killer, look to those who stood to gain from Grayson's death. Mr. Crane, for instance, or even that guard, Reed. They had more opportunity than I. Poirot bowed, his hat in hand. I look everywhere, mademoiselle. The little grey cells, they leave no stone unturned. Outside, the mist had thickened into a fog, swallowing the street in a ghostly haze. Japp pulled his coat tighter, his frustration evident. She's slippery, Poirot, all polish and no cracks. But that bit about Grayson wanting to set things right, that's something, isn't it? Why, mon ami, Poirot replied, his gaze distant as they climbed into the cab. It is a thread, one that ties to Grayson's diary, to Crane's denials, to Reed's fear. Mademoiselle Vale is not the simple client she appears, but whether she is victim or villain, I cannot yet say. He tapped his cane against the cab floor, his mind sifting through the fragments of the case. We return to the bank, Japp. The vault. It holds more than we have seen. And the locksmith, has he opened Grayson's cabinet? Japp nodded. Got word just before we left. He's cracked it. I told them to leave it untouched till we get there. Bon, Poirot said, his voice firm. The cabinet, the vault, the diary. They will speak to us. And the truth, it will not hide from Hercule Poirot. As the cab rattled through the fog, Poirot's thoughts swirled like the mist outside. Miss Vale's composure, her guarded answers, her subtle accusations, they were pieces of a puzzle that grew ever more intricate. The silent vault had claimed a life, but its secrets were beginning to whisper, and Poirot was listening. Chapter 7. The Vault's Secret. The Royal Dominion Bank stood as usual, shrouded in the evening fog, its marble façade a ghostly silhouette against the gaslit street. Hercule Poirot and Inspector Japp entered the building, their footsteps echoing in the deserted corridors, where the day's bustle had given way to an eerie stillness. The air was heavy with the scent of the polish and old paper, but the metallic tang that had haunted Poirot's senses since his first visit seemed sharper now, as if the bank itself were whispering clues to the tragedy within. They descended the spiral staircase to the vault, its steel door gleaming dully under the electric lights, a silent guardian of secrets both financial and fatal. Poirot's eyes, sharp as ever, swept over the vault's interior as they entered. The space was unchanged since his last visit. The seamless steel walls, the rows of safety deposit boxes, the small oak desk where Harold Grayson had met his end. The desk was bare now, save for a single ledger, its pages still open to Grayson's final calculations. The faint, unplaceable odor lingered, teasing Poirot's senses with its elusive presence. Japp, Poirot said, his voice low but resonant in the confined space. This vault, it is a fortress, yet it has betrayed its master. We must look beyond what is seen, to what is hidden. The little grey cells, they sense a method here, a mechanism that brought death without a trace. Japp, his notebook tucked under his arm, scratched his chin. I've had the place gone over twice, Poirot. No scratches on the lock, no hidden doors, no vents. It's a sealed box. How do you kill a man in a place like this without leaving a mark? Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. A sealed box, oui, but even a box may hold secrets. Let us examine this desk once more. He approached the desk, his gloved fingers tracing its edges with the precision of a surgeon. The ledger, its columns filled with Grayson's meticulous figures, offered no immediate answers, but Poirot's attention was drawn to the floor beneath. A faint scratch, barely visible in the lamplight, marred the otherwise pristine steel. He knelt, his magnifying glass in hand, and studied the mark, a thin, deliberate line, as if something had been dragged across the surface. Curieux, Poirot murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. He pressed gently along the scratch, his fingers probing for any irregularity. A soft click rewarded his efforts, and a small panel, no larger than a book, sprang open in the floor, revealing a hidden compartment. Japp leaned forward, his eyes wide. Good Lord, Poirot, what's that? Poirot's gloved hand reached into the compartment, extracting a small, intricate mechanism, a brass device, no bigger than a pocket watch, with a glass vial attached. The vial was empty, but a faint chemical odor clung to it, sharp and acrid, distinct from the vault's metallic tang. Poirot held it to the light, his expression one of quiet triumph. A timed device, he said, turning to Japp. This, mon ami, is the instrument of death, a mechanism designed to release a substance, likely a gas, odorless and deadly, into the vault after it was sealed. It explains the thin air, the blue lips of Monsieur Grayson. A murder most ingenious. Japp's jaw dropped, his notebook forgotten. Gas? In a sealed vault. But how did it get in there? And who put it there? Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mind racing through the possibilities. The how, it is clear. This device was set to activate at a precise moment, perhaps hours after Grayson locked himself inside. The who, that is the question. Only 3 had access to this vault. Monsieur Reed, the guard, Monsieur Crane, the colleague, and Mademoiselle Vale, the client. One of them placed this here, or knew of its presence. Japp crouched beside the compartment, peering at the mechanism. Could have been planted days ago, during a routine check. Crane's got the know-how, and he's got motive if Grayson was onto his embezzling. But Reed, he's been shifty about that flask, and Miss Vale, she was in here that night. Poirot nodded, carefully wrapping the device in a handkerchief and tucking it into his pocket. Oui, each is a suspect, yet each denies involvement. We must test this device, Japp. Have your chemists analyze the vial's residue. It may tell us the nature of the gas, and perhaps point to its source. Japp straightened, his expression grim. I'll get it to the lab tonight. But Poirot, this thing, it's clever. Too clever for a guard like Reed, don't you think? Crane's the brains, or maybe Miss Vale's got more to her than she lets on. Poirot's gaze drifted to the vault door, its bolts gleaming like sentinels. Cleverness, mon ami, is not confined to rank or education. Reed may be simple, but simplicity can mask cunning. Crane's ambition is evident, yet his fear suggests he may be a pawn. And Mademoiselle Vale? Her composure is a shield, but what it protects, I cannot yet say. He stepped back, his cane tapping a slow rhythm against the floor. There is another matter, Japp. The locked cabinet in Grayson's office. Has the locksmith succeeded? Japp nodded, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. Just got word before we came down here. They opened it an hour ago. Found a ledger inside, not like the others. It's got entries marked with AC and some odd transactions, small sums siphoned off over months. Looks like embezzlement, plain as day. Poirot's eyes narrowed, a spark of insight flickering within them. A ledger, you say? This confirms what Grayson's diary hinted at. He was closing in on a thief, and the initials AC point to Monsieur Crane. Yet we must be cautious. Evidence so clear, it can be a deception. Japp frowned, his fingers tightening on the paper. Deception? You think someone's planting evidence to pin it on Crane? Perhaps, Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. Or perhaps Crane is as guilty as he appears. We must examine this ledger, Japp, and compare it to the bank's records. The numbers, they do not lie, but men do. As they left the vault, the heavy door groaned shut behind them, its bolts sliding into place with a finality that echoed Grayson's fate. Poirot's mind was a whirl of fragments, the hidden mechanism, the chemical odor, the ledger's damning entries. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained incomplete. Japp, Poirot said as they ascended the staircase, I wish to speak with the bank's clerks, those who worked closely with Grayson. They may have seen or heard something, a word, a glance, that connects our suspects to this device. Japp nodded, jotting a note. I'll round them up first thing tomorrow. Anything else? Oui, Poirot replied, his gaze distant as the fog pressed against the bank's windows. The flask that Monsieur Reed claims to have lost. It troubles me. Its disappearance is too convenient. Have your men search the bank once more and the pawnshops near the docks. If it held whiskey, as Reed claims, it is of little matter. But if it held something else—" Japp's eyes widened. "You think it's tied to the gas?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic, his moustache curling slightly. "I think, mon ami, that nothing in this case is as it seems. The silent vault has spoken, but its whispers are not yet clear. Hercule Poirot will listen until they are." As they stepped into the fog-shrouded street, the bank loomed behind them, a fortress of secrets that had begun to yield its truths. The mechanism in Poirot's pocket was a tangible clue, but the motive, the hand that set it in motion, remained elusive. The little grey cells were at work, piecing together the threads of ambition, fear, and deception that wove through the heart of the Royal Dominion Bank. Chapter 8. The Flask's Clue. The fog had thickened into a dense shroud by the time Hercule Poirot and Inspector Japp reached the narrow streets near the London docks, where the air was heavy with the briny scent of the Thames and the acrid bite of coal smoke. The pawnshop, tucked between a tavern and a chandler's, was a dimly lit den of curiosities, its windows cluttered with tarnished watches, chipped porcelain, and faded trinkets. Poirot's polished shoes seemed out of place on the grimy cobblestones, but his focus was unwavering as he entered, his cane tapping a steady rhythm against the warped floorboards. Japp followed, his expression a mix of skepticism and determination, his notebook already open in anticipation of answers. The shop's proprietor, a wiry man with a crooked nose and shrewd eyes, looked up from his ledger as they approached. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice raspy from years of pipe smoke, "what brings you to my humble establishment?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Monsieur, we seek an item of interest, a flask, perhaps of silver or pewter, recently pawned by a man named Thomas Reed. It is a matter of great importance, connected to a tragedy at the Royal Dominion Bank." The pawnbroker's eyes narrowed, a flicker of caution crossing his face. "Reed, you say? I get a lot of folks through here, but I recall a flask. Came in the day after that banker's death was in the papers. Big fellow, nervous. Said it was his, but needed quick cash. Paid him a shilling for it." Japp leaned forward, his voice sharp. "You've still got it, then? Let's see it." The pawnbroker shuffled to a cluttered shelf, rummaging through a box of odds and ends before producing a small, tarnished silver flask. Its surface was engraved with a simple monogram, TR, and a faint dent marred one side as if it had been dropped. Poirot took it carefully in his gloved hands, turning it over with the precision of a jeweller examining a gem. "Most interesting," he murmured, unscrewing the cap. A faint chemical odour wafted from within, sharp and acrid, matching the scent of the vial from the vault's hidden mechanism. He held it to the light, noting a residue clinging to the inner walls, a thin film that shimmered faintly under scrutiny. Japp's eyes widened. "That's no whiskey, Poirot. Smells like that stuff we found in the vault. You think this held the gas?" Poirot's gaze was intense, his mind racing. "Not the gas itself, mon ami, but perhaps a component, a liquid that, when released, became deadly. This flask, it is no mere trinket. It is a piece of the puzzle, left behind in haste or panic." He turned to the pawnbroker, his voice calm but commanding. "This flask, you are certain it came from Monsieur Reed? And when, precisely?" "Day after the banker died," the man replied, scratching his chin. Morning it was. He was in a state, sweating. Kept looking over his shoulder like someone was after him. Said he needed the money, and didn't care what I gave him. Poirot nodded, tucking the flask into a handkerchief and slipping it into his pocket. Merci, monsieur. This will be of great assistance. The police will compensate you for its value. As they stepped back into the fog, Japp rubbed his hands together, his excitement palpable. That's it, Poirot. Reed's our man. He lied about losing the flask, sold it to cover his tracks. And that smell, it's got to be tied to the gas that killed Grayson. Poirot's expression remained serene, though his eyes gleamed with a quiet intensity. Perhaps, Japp, but we must not be hasty. Reed's fear, it is genuine. But is it the fear of a guilty man, or one caught in a web not of his making? We must confront him with this evidence. They returned to Reed's flat, the drizzle now a steady patter against the cab's roof. The guard was home, his burly frame hunched over a chipped mug of tea, his face pale as he opened the door. The sight of Poirot and Japp, and the flask in Poirot's hand sent a visible shudder through him. Monsieur Reed, Poirot said, holding up the flask, you told us this was lost, a simple whiskey flask dropped in carelessness. Yet here it is, recovered from a pawn shop near the docks, sold by you the morning after Grayson's death. And its contents, they are not whiskey, but something far more sinister. Explain yourself, if you please. Reed's hands trembled, the mug clattering onto the table. I didn't kill him, sir. I swear it. I found that flask in the vault near Mr. Grayson's body when I opened it that morning. It wasn't mine. Not really. I panicked, thought it'd look bad, me finding it there. So I took it, sold it quick. I didn't know what was in it. Japp's voice was stern, his notebook open. You expect us to believe that, Reid? You find a flask next to a dead man, and instead of reporting it, you pawn it? That's not the act of an innocent man. Reed's eyes darted between them, his voice cracking. I was scared, Inspector. I'm just a guard, not educated like Mr. Grayson or Mr. Crane. I thought they'd pin it on me, say I had something to do with it. I just wanted it gone. Poirot's gaze was unyielding, his voice soft but piercing. And who placed this flask in the vault, Monsieur Reed? You were the last to see Grayson alive. Did you see anyone else that night? Anyone who might have left this behind? Reed shook his head, his hands gripping the edge of the table. No one, sir. Just Mr. Grayson, working at his desk. I told you, he locked the vault himself. I heard the bolts slide as I left. Poirot stepped closer, the flask glinting in his hand. And yet, this flask was there when you found him dead. It held a substance, Monsieur Reed, that matches the residue in a device we found hidden in the vault. A device that released a deadly gas. You claim innocence, but you hid evidence. Why should Hercule Poirot believe you? Reed's shoulders slumped, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know nothing about no gas, sir. I just found the flask, I swear. I didn't want trouble. I've got a wife, a kid. I couldn't risk it. Poirot's eyes softened, though his scrutiny did not waver. Trouble, oui. You have found it nonetheless. But fear not, Monsieur Reed. The truth, it will protect the innocent and condemn the guilty. Tell me, did you ever see Monsieur Crane or Mademoiselle Vale with such a flask, or anything unusual in the vault? Reed shook his head, his eyes downcast. No, sir. Mr. Crane was always at his desk, not in the vault unless Grayson called him. Miss Vale, she came for her deposits, but I never saw her with anything like that. Just her purse and a small case for her heirlooms. Poirot nodded, his mind sifting through the guard's words. "Merci, Monsieur Reed. You will remain in London, and you will speak of this to no one. The flask, it speaks louder than you know." As they left, though, flat, Japp's frustration was evident. "He's either a fool or a liar, Poirot. Hiding evidence like that, it's suspicious as hell." "Suspicious, oui," Poirot replied, his gaze distant as the fog swirled around them. "But a fool may be a tool, Japp. The flask, the device, the ledger, they point to a plan, a mind that calculated every detail. Reed's fear suggests he is not that mind, but he may have seen more than he realizes." Japp scribbled a note, his brow furrowed. "I'll get the flask to the lab, have them test that residue. If it matches the vial, we've got a solid link to the murder." "Bon," Poirot said, adjusting his hat. "And I wish to see the ledger from Grayson's cabinet, Japp. Its entries, they may tell us who stood to gain from his silence. And the clerks, have you spoken to them?" "Not yet," Japp admitted. "But I've got a list of names. I'll have them ready for you tomorrow." Poirot's smile was faint, his thoughts already racing ahead. "Tomorrow, oui. The pieces of this puzzle, they are coming together. But the picture is not yet clear. The silent vault has given us a mechanism, a flask, a motive. Now, we must find the hand that set them in motion." As the cab carried them back through the fog, Poirot's mind was alight with possibilities. The flask was no mere coincidence. It was a mistake, a crack in the killer's careful plan. The little grey cells were closing in, and the truth, however cleverly hidden, could not escape Hercule Poirot. Chapter 9. The Colleague's Confession. The Royal Dominion. Bank stood silent under the weight of a moonless night, its marble corridors dimly lit by flickering gaslights that cast long, wavering shadows. Hercule Poirot had arranged for a gathering in the bank's boardroom, a space of polished mahogany and heavy drapes, where the air seemed to hum with the gravity of the moment. Inspector Japp stood by the door, his arms crossed, his eyes darting between the three figures seated at the long table: Thomas Reed, Arthur Crane, and Miss Eleanor Vale. Each bore the marks of strain. Reed's hands fidgeting with a frayed cuff, Crane's jaw tight with suppressed agitation, and Miss Vale's composure a touch too perfect, her gloved fingers resting lightly on the table's edge. Poirot stood at the head of the table, his small, fastidious figure commanding the room with an authority that belied his stature. His green eyes, sharp and unrelenting, moved from one suspect to the next, as if peeling back the layers of their carefully constructed façades. In his gloved hand he held the silver flask, its tarnished surface catching the light, a silent witness to the tragedy that had unfolded in the vault below. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice calm yet resonant, cutting through the tension like a blade. "We are gathered here to unravel the mystery of Harold Grayson's death, a death that occurred in a vault sealed as tightly as a tomb, with no sign of entry, no mark of violence. Yet death came, silent and precise, and one among you knows how it was done." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. The room was still, save for the faint creak of Reed's chair as he shifted uncomfortably. Poirot raised the flask, holding it aloft like a relic. This flask, found in a pawnshop near the docks, bears the initials of Monsieur Reed. Yet it held not whiskey, but a chemical residue, a substance linked to the mechanism hidden in the vault, a mechanism that released a deadly gas to claim Grayson's life. This is no accident, but a murder most calculated." Reed's face flushed, his hands clenching into fists. "I told you, sir, I didn't do it. I found that flask in the vault near Mr. Grayson's body. I panicked, sold it. I swear I had no part in his death." Poirot's gaze shifted to Crane, whose thin lips were pressed into a line, his eyes avoiding the flask. "And you, Monsieur Crane?" Poirot continued, his voice soft but unyielding. "You have been less than forthcoming. Grayson's diary names you a C beside entries of financial irregularities. A ledger, hidden in his office, records sums siphoned from accounts, sums that point to embezzlement. And a letter, signed with your initials, demanded a meeting to resolve matters. These are not the marks of an innocent man." Crane's chair scraped as he leaned forward, his voice sharp with indignation. "I've told you, Monsieur Poirot, I didn't kill Grayson. Yes, I looked into those discrepancies. He asked me to. The ledger, the letter. Someone's trying to make me look guilty. I was nowhere near the vault that night." Miss Vale's emerald eyes flickered with interest, though her expression remained serene. "It seems, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice cool and measured, "that Mr. Crane protests rather loudly. Perhaps he fears the truth as much as he claims to seek it." Crane's head snapped toward her, his eyes blazing. "And what about you, Miss Vale? You were in the vault with Grayson, whispering secrets, keeping your heirlooms from prying eyes. What were you really doing there?" Poirot raised a hand, silencing the brewing argument. "Enough, mes amis. Accusations, they fly like arrows, but they do not yet strike the target. Let us consider the facts. A mechanism, hidden in the vault's floor, released a gas that stopped Grayson's heart. The flask, found by Monsieur Reed, held a component of that gas. And the ledger, it points to a motive. Money, siphoned away by someone with access, someone trusted." He turned to Crane, his gaze piercing. "Monsieur Crane, you were Grayson's deputy, his protégé, yet he suspected you. Why? Did he discover your ambition had led you to betray his trust?" Crane's face drained of color, his hands gripping the table's edge. I admit it," he said, his voice breaking. "I took money, small amounts, to cover personal debts. Grayson was closing in, asking questions, checking my work. But I didn't kill him. I was going to confess, to make it right. That letter, it wasn't from me. Someone forged it to trap me." Japp's notebook snapped open, his pencil scratching furiously. "Embezzlement's a motive, Crane. You had access to the vault, the knowledge to rig a device. And you're telling us someone else framed you. Who?" Crane's eyes darted to Miss Vale, then to Reed, his voice trembling. "I don't know. Maybe she was there that night. Or Reed, he's been lying about that flask." Reed bristled, his fists clenching. "Don't you pin this on me, Crane. I found that flask, nothing more." Poirot's smile was faint, almost imperceptible. "Calm yourselves, messieurs. The truth, it does not emerge through shouting. Monsieur Crane, your confession of theft is noted, but it does not yet make you a murderer. The device, the flask, they require a mind both cunning and precise. We must look to the details." He turned to Miss Vale, his eyes narrowing. "Mademoiselle, you were in the vault at 8, you say, for a deposit of heirlooms. Yet Grayson's diary speaks of your secrecy, your urgency. Did he know something that threatened you? A secret worth killing for?" Miss Vale's composure held, though her fingers tightened slightly. "I have no secrets worth killing for, Monsieur Poirot. My family's past is private, yes, but it is no crime. Grayson was alive when I left, and I saw no flask, no device. If anyone had motive, it was Mr. Crane, who you say was stealing from the bank." Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting back to the flask in his hand. "The flask? It is the key. Monsieur Reed, you found it beside Grayson's body, yet you did not report it. Why? And where, precisely, was it placed?" Reed swallowed, his voice low. "It was on the floor, near the desk, half under a chair. I thought it might have been Mr. Grayson's, but it had my initials, so I took it. Didn't want to be blamed." Poirot's eyes gleamed, a spark of insight flickering within them. "Half under a chair, you say? As if dropped in haste, perhaps, and the mechanism hidden in the floor. It was not meant to be found. This suggests a plan disrupted, a mistake made." He paced the room, his cane tapping a slow rhythm against the polished floor. "The gas, it was timed to dissipate, leaving no trace but the faint residue in the vial, and this flask. The ledger points to Monsieur Crane, but the flask implicates Monsieur Reed, and Mademoiselle Vale. Your presence in the vault places you at the scene. Yet only one mind conceived this murder." Japp cleared his throat, his impatience evident. "Poirot? We've got Crane's confession to theft, Reed's lie about the flask, and Miss Vale's secrecy. What's next? We can't keep them here forever." Poirot's smile was serene, his voice firm. "Patience, mon ami. The truth. It is close. I wish to see the bank's ledgers, those tied to the southern accounts, and the results of the chemical analysis on the flask and vial. They will confirm the nature of the gas and perhaps its source. And one more thing. Have your men search Crane's office. If he is the thief, there may be evidence he could not destroy." Crane's head snapped up, his voice sharp. "You won't find anything. I've admitted what I did, but I'm no killer." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "We shall see, Monsieur Crane. The little grey cells, they do not rest until every thread is woven into the truth." As the suspects rose to leave, their faces etched with varying shades of fear and defiance, Poirot's mind was alight with possibilities. The flask, the ledger, the hidden mechanism. They were pieces of a puzzle that was nearly complete. The silent vault had yielded its secrets, but the final revelation, the hand that had set death in motion, was yet to be uncovered. Chapter 10. The trap tightens the royal dominion. Bank's boardroom was cloaked in the somber glow of gaslights, their flames casting a dance of shadows across the polished mahogany table. Hercule Poirot stood at its head, his small, meticulous figure a beacon of calm authority amidst the tension that crackled like static in the air. Inspector Japp leaned against the wall near the door, his arms crossed, his eyes sharp with anticipation. The three suspects, Thomas Reed, Arthur Crane, and Miss Eleanor Vale, sat in their respective chairs, each a study in unease. Reed's broad hands fidgeted with a loose thread on his cuff. Crane's thin face was drawn with a mix of defiance and dread, and Miss Vale's composed exterior held, though her emerald eyes betrayed a flicker of wariness as they met Poirot's unyielding gaze. The fog outside had thickened, pressing against the tall windows like a silent conspirator, muffling the sounds of the London night. In Poirot's gloved hand, the tarnished silver flask gleamed faintly, its monogram, TR, a mute accusation. Beside it, on the table, rested the small brass mechanism from the vault, its empty vial catching the light like a sinister jewel. The ledger from Grayson's locked cabinet lay open, its pages marked with damning entries, and a folded letter, signed A.C., sat beside it, a quiet testament to a meeting that had never occurred. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice steady, each word chosen with the precision of a sculptor's chisel. "We stand at the precipice of truth. Harold Grayson died in a vault sealed from within, his life extinguished by a gas released by this device." He gestured to the mechanism, his eyes never leaving the suspects. "The flask, found by Monsieur Reed, held a chemical that fueled this silent killer. The ledger points to theft, and the letter suggests a confrontation. Tonight, we will unravel who set this trap, and why." Reed shifted, his chair creaking under his weight. "I've told you, sir, I didn't do it. I found that flask, that's all. I never touched no device." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile beneath it. "Oui, Monsieur Reed, you have said this. And yet you hid the flask, sold it in panic. Your fear, it speaks. But of what? Guilt or innocence ensnared?" He turned to Crane, whose fingers drummed a nervous rhythm on the table. "Monsieur Crane, you have confessed to embezzlement, to siphoning funds from the bank's accounts. Grayson suspected you. His diary confirms it. This letter, signed with your initials, demanded a meeting to resolve matters. And this device," he tapped the mechanism, "required knowledge and access, both of which you possess. The trap, it tightens around you, does it not?" Crane's face flushed, his voice rising with a mix of anger and desperation. "I told you I didn't write that letter. Someone's framing me. Yes, I took money, but I was going to repay it. I didn't kill Grayson. I had no reason to. He was going to the board, not the police. I could have talked him round." Miss Vale's lips curved slightly, her voice cool as she interjected. "A thief's promises, Mr. Crane, are worth little. You had motive, opportunity, and the skill to rig such a device. It seems rather convenient to claim a frame-up now." Crane's eyes blazed as he turned to her. "And what about you, Miss Vale? Sneaking into the vault at odd hours, whispering with Grayson about your so-called heirlooms. What were you hiding? Maybe you wanted him silenced." Poirot raised a hand, his voice cutting through the rising tempers. "Silence, s'il vous plaît. Accusations, they are like sparks, but they do not yet light the truth. Let us examine the facts with order and method." He lifted the flask, turning it in his hand. "This flask, Monsieur Reed, you found it near Grayson's body, half under a chair, as if dropped in haste. Its residue matches the vial in this mechanism, a chemical that, when released, became a lethal gas, odorless, dissipating quickly. The ledger shows sums stolen, marked with A.C., Monsieur Crane's initials. The letter, too, points to him. But the question remains, who placed the device in the vault, and when?" Japp stepped forward, his notebook open. "The lab results came in, Poirot. The residue in the flask and vial, it's a compound, something called cyanogen chloride. Nasty stuff. Turns to gas when exposed to air, kills quick, leaves no trace but a faint residue. Not easy to come by, needs someone with access to chemicals. Maybe a lab." Poirot's eyes gleamed, a spark of insight flickering within them. "Cyanogen chloride, you say? A poison most sophisticated, requiring knowledge beyond the ordinary. Monsieur Crane, as a man of education, you have studied chemistry, non? Such a compound would not be unfamiliar to you." Crane's hands clenched, his voice shaking. "I studied chemistry at university, yes, but I'm no chemist. I manage accounts, not poisons. Anyone could have gotten that stuff. Miss Vale, she's got connections, money. Or Reed, he's always poking around where he shouldn't." Reed bristled, his face reddening. "Don't you dare, Crane. I'm no killer, and I don't know nothing about no chemicals." Poirot's gaze shifted to Miss Vale, his voice soft but probing. "And you, mademoiselle. Your composure, it is admirable. But your presence in the vault that night places you at the heart of this mystery. Did Grayson know something about your heirlooms that threatened you? A secret worth protecting with death?" Miss Vale's eyes met his, steady but guarded. "I have no knowledge of chemicals or devices, Monsieur Poirot. My business with Grayson was private, yes, but it was no crime. If anyone had reason to fear him, it was Mr. Crane, whose thefts were about to be exposed." Poirot paced slowly, his cane tapping a deliberate rhythm against the floor. The device was placed in the vault before Grayson's death, likely during a routine maintenance or inspection. Monsieur Crane, you had access to the vault, as did Monsieur Reed. Mademoiselle Vale, your visits were less frequent, but no less significant. The mechanism was set to release its gas after the vault was sealed, ensuring no witnesses. But the flask, it was a mistake, a flaw in a plan otherwise perfect. He stopped, his gaze locking onto Crane. "Monsieur Crane, your confession to theft gives you motive. Your knowledge gives you means. The letter, the ledger, they point to you. Yet you claim a frame. If not you, then who?" Crane's voice cracked, his hands trembling. "I don't know. Someone who wanted Grayson dead and me blamed. Maybe Vale? She's got secrets. Or Reed, he's lying about that flask." Poirot's smile was serene, his eyes unyielding. "The truth, it is close, Monsieur Crane. The flask, the device, the ledger, they are threads in a tapestry, and the pattern is emerging. We will speak again, all of you. The trap, it tightens, and the guilty cannot escape." Japp cleared his throat, his impatience evident. "What's next, Poirot? We've got Crane's motive, Reed's lie, and Miss Vale's secrecy. The lab's confirmed the gas, and we've got the device. We need a confession, or we're just chasing shadows." Poirot nodded, his expression resolute. "Patience, mon ami. I wish to see the bank's maintenance records. When was the vault last serviced, and by whom? And the clerks, Japp, have they spoken of Grayson's final days? A man under pressure, as he was, leaves traces of his fears." Japp scribbled a note, his brow furrowed. "I've got the clerks lined up for tomorrow. Maintenance records, too. Anything else?" "Oui," Poirot said, his voice firm. "Search Crane's home, his office, his personal effects. If he is guilty, there may be traces of his work, a receipt, vial, a note, and Mademoiselle Vale, her heirlooms, I wish to know more. Request a list of her deposits, discreetly." As the suspects rose, their faces etched with strain, Poirot's mind was a whirl of possibilities. The flask, the mechanism, the ledger. They were pieces of a puzzle that pointed to Crane. Yet the clarity of the evidence troubled him. The little grey cells sensed a deeper truth, a hand that had woven this web with precision. The silent vault was speaking, and Hercule Poirot was listening. Chapter 11. The Client's Innocence. The morning light struggled through the heavy fog that clung to London's streets, casting the Royal Dominion Bank in a ghostly pallor. Inside, the boardroom was a crucible of tension, its polished mahogany table reflecting the strained faces of Thomas Reed, Arthur Crane, and Miss Eleanor Vale. Hercule Poirot stood at the room's centre, his small, impeccable figure a beacon of calm amidst the storm of suspicion. Inspector Japp, stationed near the door, flipped through his notebook, his brow furrowed with the weight of the case's mounting evidence. The air was thick with the scent of wax and old wood, but the metallic tang that had haunted the vault seemed to linger, a reminder of the silent death that had sparked this investigation. Poirot's green eyes, sharp as ever, moved from one suspect to the next, each a study in contrasts. Reed's broad frame hunched with nervous energy, Crane's thin face pale with a mix of fear and defiance, and Miss Vale's poised exterior unshaken, though her emerald eyes held a flicker of guarded anticipation. On the table before them lay the damning relics of the case, the tarnished flask with Reed's initials, the brass mechanism with its empty vial, the ledger marked with Crane's initials, and the letter signed a C, each a thread in the web of deceit that Poirot was unravelling. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice smooth, yet carrying the weight of inevitability, "we approach the heart of this mystery. Harold Grayson died in a vault, sealed from within, his life extinguished by a gas released by this device." He gestured to the mechanism, its vial glinting faintly. "The flask, found by Monsieur Reed, held a chemical that fueled this silent killer. The ledger points to theft, to Monsieur Crane's ambition. Yet, as the little grey cells work, a pattern emerges, a pattern that clears one of you and condemns another." He turned to Miss Vale, his gaze softening, but no less piercing. "Mademoiselle Vale, you have been an enigma in this affair. Your late visit to the vault, your insistence on secrecy, as noted in Grayson's diary, raised suspicion. You spoke of heirlooms, of a family's shadowed past, yet you remained calm, unshaken by accusation. Tell me, why should Hercule Poirot believe you innocent?" Miss Vale's lips parted slightly, her composure holding like a well-crafted mask. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her poor voice steady, "I have told you the truth. My business with Mr. Grayson was personal, a deposit of family papers, tied to an old scandal I wished to keep private. He was professional, nothing more. I left him alive, and I had no part in his death." Poirot nodded, his fingers resting lightly on his cane. "Oui, mademoiselle, and the evidence, it supports you. The bank's records, examined this morning, show your deposit. A locked case, opened only by Grayson, containing documents, not valuables that might tempt theft. Your meetings with him, they were about discretion, not deception. Grayson's note of your urgency was concern for your privacy, not suspicion of crime." Miss Vale's shoulders relaxed imperceptibly, a faint exhale escaping her lips. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I only wished to protect my family's name." Crane's voice cut through, sharp with desperation. "And what about me? You're clearing her. But I'm no murderer. That ledger, the letter, they're planted, I tell you." Poirot's gaze shifted to Crane, his eyes narrowing. "Monsieur Crane, your confession to embezzlement is damning, yet you claim a frame. The ledger, marked with your initials, shows sums siphoned from accounts. The letter, signed A.C., suggests a confrontation Grayson never lived to see. And the mechanism, cyanogen chloride, a poison requiring knowledge you possess from your university days. The trap, it tightens around you." Crane's hands clenched, his voice rising. "I didn't do it. Yes, I took money, but I didn't kill him. Someone used my initials, my past, to make me look guilty." Reed, silent until now, shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the flask. "What about me, sir? I found that flask, like I said. I didn't know what was in it. I'm no killer, neither." Poirot's smile was faint, almost serene. "Monsieur Reed, your fear, it is genuine. But your role is clearer now. The flask with your initials was found near Grayson's body, yet its placement, half under a chair, suggests it was dropped, not by you, but by another. You hid it, sold it, out of panic, not guilt. The little grey cells, they see you as a witness, not a murderer." Reed's face softened with relief, though his hands still trembled. "Thank you, sir. I just want this over." Japp stepped forward, his notebook snapping shut. "So, Poirot, you're saying Vale's in the clear, Reed's just a fool, and Crane's our man. The evidence all points his way. Motive, means, opportunity." Poirot's gaze returned to Crane, his voice steady but relentless. "Monsieur Crane, the evidence, it is formidable. The ledger shows your theft, the letter your intent to confront Grayson, and the mechanism your capability. Yet you claim a frame. If this is so, who would wish to see you blamed?" Crane's eyes darted to Miss Vale, then to Reed, his voice hoarse. "I don't know. Someone who knew about the money, who wanted Grayson gone and me out of the way. Maybe Vale? She's got secrets, connections, or someone else in the bank." Poirot shook his head, his expression resolute. "No, Monsieur Crane. The little grey cells, they do not agree. Mademoiselle Vale's secrets are personal, not criminal. Monsieur Reed's actions, they are those of a frightened man, not a schemer. But you had access to the vault, knowledge of its workings, and a motive to silence Grayson before he exposed your theft to the board." Crane stood, his chair scraping against the floor, his voice breaking. "You're wrong, Poirot. I didn't rig that device. I didn't write that letter. I'm being set up." Poirot's eyes gleamed, a spark of certainty within them. "The truth, Monsieur Crane, it does not bend to protests. The mechanism was placed during a routine maintenance to which you had access. The flask, dropped in haste, was meant to be overlooked, but Monsieur Reed found it. The ledger, hidden in Grayson's cabinet, bears your initials in your own hand. The trap, it is yours." Japp moved forward, his handcuffs glinting in the gaslight. "Arthur Crane, you're under arrest for the murder of Harold Grayson. Anything you say can be used against you." Crane's face crumpled, his hands rising as if to ward off the inevitable. "No, you've got it wrong. I didn't—" Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "The evidence, Monsieur Crane, it speaks louder than your words. The little grey cells, they have seen the pattern, and it points to you." As Japp led Crane away, Miss Vale rose, her expression a mix of relief and solemnity. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft, "I trust this brings justice to Mr. Grayson." Poirot bowed, his hat in hand. "Justice, mademoiselle, is the goal. The truth, it is the path." Reed lingered, his broad frame sagging with exhaustion. "Am I free, sir? I didn't mean no harm." Poirot nodded, his gaze kind but firm. "You are free, Monsieur Reed. But learn from this. Truth, it is better than fear." As the room emptied, Poirot stood alone, his eyes on the relics of the case, the flask, the mechanism, the ledger. The trap had closed, but a faint unease lingered in his mind, a whisper that the pattern, though clear, was almost too perfect. The little grey cells, ever vigilant, urged one final step to ensure no thread remained unwoven. Chapter 12. The Final Revelation. The fog had lifted, leaving London's streets bathed in the pale glow of a late morning sun, a rare clarity that seemed to mirror the moment of the truth Hercule Poirot was about to unveil. The boardroom of the Royal Dominion Bank, with its gleaming mahogany table and heavy drapes, was once again the stage for his denouement. Inspector Japp stood by the door, his notebook tucked away. his expression a mix of anticipation and confidence, for the evidence against Arthur Crane appeared ironclad. Thomas Reed and Miss Eleanor Vale sat at the table, their faces etched with the strain of the past days, Reed's broad hands still for once, and Miss Vale's emerald eyes watchful, though no longer guarded. Arthur Crane, however, was not seated among them. He stood near Japp, his wrists bound by handcuffs, his thin face a mask of defiance and despair. Poirot stood at the head of the table, his small, fastidious figure commanding the room with an air of quiet certainty. In his gloved hands he held the relics of the case, the tarnished silver flask, the brass mechanism with its empty vial, the ledger marked with damning entries, and the letter signed A.C. These objects, laid out before him like pieces on a chessboard, were the keys to the silent vault's deadly secret. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice steady, each word a deliberate step toward revelation. "We have unravelled a murder most ingenious, a death delivered in a vault sealed from within, where Harold Grayson met his end by a gas so subtle it left no trace but a faint residue. The little grey cells, they have worked tirelessly. And now the truth stands before us, clear as the morning light." He gestured to the mechanism, its vial glinting faintly. This device, hidden in the vault's floor, released cyanogen chloride, a poison requiring knowledge and precision. The flask, found by Monsieur Reed, held a component of this gas, dropped in haste. The ledger, marked with A.C., points to theft, and the letter suggests a confrontation that never came. All these threads, they weave a tapestry of guilt, and they point to one man. Poirot's gaze locked onto Crane, whose eyes widened, his voice hoarse with protest. "I've told you, Poirot, I didn't do it. I took money, yes, but I didn't kill Grayson. That letter, the device. Someone framed me." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile beneath it. "Monsieur Crane, your protests, they are loud, but the evidence, it is louder. Let us reconstruct the crime with order and method. Grayson, a man meticulous, discovered discrepancies in the accounts. Sums siphoned by you, Monsieur Crane, to cover personal debts. His diary names you A.C., and his ledger confirms it. He intended to confront you, perhaps to take the matter to the board. This you could not allow." Crane shook his head, his hands straining against the cuffs. "I was going to confess, make it right. I didn't need to kill him." Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm, but unrelenting. "Patience, Monsieur Crane. The little grey cells, they see further. The mechanism, it was placed in the vault during a routine maintenance, to which you had access. You knew Grayson's habits, his late nights, his insistence on working alone. You set the device to release its gas after the vault was sealed, after Monsieur Reed's final check at 10, ensuring no witnesses. The gas, it killed silently, dissipating before the vault was opened at dawn." Japp nodded, his expression grim. "It's airtight, Poirot. The lab confirmed the gas, the ledger shows the motive, and Crane's got the know-how from his university days. He's our man." Poirot's eyes gleamed, a spark of certainty within them. "Oui, Inspector, but let us consider the flask, a mistake, a flaw in an otherwise perfect plan. Monsieur Reed, you found it near Grayson's body, half under a chair, as if dropped in haste. You hid it, sold it, out of fear. But it was not yours, was it?" Reed shook his head, his voice low. "No, sir. I thought it was, with my initials, but I never owned a flask like that. I just panicked, didn't want to be blamed." Poirot turned to Miss Vale, whose composure remained intact, though her eyes held a quiet respect for his unravelling of the case. Mademoiselle Vale, your role, it was a distraction. Your secretive meetings with Grayson, your heirlooms, they cast suspicion. But the bank's records show your deposits were as you claimed. Documents, not treasures. You were no threat to Grayson, but your presence in the vault that night gave Monsieur Crane a convenient shadow to hide behind. Miss Vale inclined her head, her voice soft. I'm glad to be cleared, Monsieur Poirot. Justice for Mr. Grayson is all I desire. Crane's voice broke through, desperate and raw. You're wrong, Poirot. The letter, the ledger, someone planted them. I didn't rig that device. I'm no chemist, not any more. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting, his voice firm. Monsieur Crane, the ledger, it is in your hand. The maintenance records, checked this morning, show you inspected the vault 3 days before Grayson's death, alone. The chemical, cyanogen chloride, requires knowledge you studied at university, and the flask, your mistake, dropped as you set the device, perhaps in a moment of distraction. You intended to retrieve it, but Monsieur Reed found it first. Crane's shoulders slumped, his defiance crumbling. No, you've got it wrong. Japp stepped forward, his handcuffs glinting as he tightened his grip on Crane's arm. That's enough, Crane. You're coming with us. The evidence doesn't lie. Poirot's expression softened, though his resolve did not waver. Monsieur Crane, you sought to protect your ambition, your position, but in doing so, you took a life. The silent vault. It was your weapon, but it could not hide your crime from Hercule Poirot. As Japp led Crane from the room, Reed stood, his face a mix of relief and exhaustion. Is it over, sir? Can I go home? Poirot nodded, his gaze kind but firm. Oui, Monsieur Reed. Go to your family, but let this be a lesson. Truth, it is always better than fear. Miss Vale rose, her movements graceful, her eyes meeting Poirot's with a quiet gratitude. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. You have brought clarity where there was only shadow. Poirot bowed, his hat in hand. The truth, mademoiselle, it is my purpose. The little grey cells, they do not fail. As the room emptied, Poirot stood alone, his eyes lingering on the relics of the case. The flask, the mechanism, the ledger, they had told their story, and the guilty had been named. Yet a faint unease lingered, a whisper in his mind that the pattern, though complete, was almost too perfect. He dismissed it, for the evidence was clear, and the case was closed. Outside, the sun broke through the last wisps of fog, casting a golden light over the bank's façade. Poirot adjusted his hat, his cane tapping lightly against the cobblestones as he stepped into the street. The silent vault had yielded its secrets, and justice had been served. The little grey cells, ever vigilant, could rest, at least until the next puzzle called.